Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of From Idea to Launch. Today we're going to take a break on adding any new features, and since this code here has no tests, we're going to add some tests. Now we're going to add some tests to the backend and our API route specifically, and in a separate video I think we'll work with Cypress, which is a front-end testing technology. When we have a bit more of a front end, we'll walk through doing some of that. So first, we're using a couple libraries, but to install them. So I'm just going to yarn add, and we're using Jest. We may have to add some more features on top of that, but because we're going to use Babel. Jest as well as testing library /React. Okay, to use Babel, which we're using because NextJS automatically supports the transpiling, we have to add a few more things here. Babel Jest, Babel core, and Babel preset env. And while that installs, we have to create a Babel file. So Next.js has one built in. Babel, oh yeah, okay. I didn't do add. Yarn, add, and we can do this dev. Oh, I didn't do the other one's dev. I'll have to move them. We only did them in development, obviously. All right, so we're gonna add in a file here, which is babel.config.js. So as I was saying, Next.js automatically has their own Babel config. This one might override it, so we'll have to figure out how to clean that up. But otherwise, we will create this one here, module.exports, nothing complicated in here. I just want to make sure we're translating ES6 syntax, and we're not doing React testing yet, but when we do, we'll have to add another preset in here. Presets, and then it's an array, and inside that array targets, oops, nope. We actually have to put preset env, Babel, preset dash, and it's been so long since I've written one of these files because targets Next.js just handled it for me. So nice. There we go. Okay, and then open up our package.json file. We're going to fix a few things in here. First of all, this is not a dependency. This is a dev dependency over here. It'll have to go at the top. There we are. And the other one was Jest. Here it is, Jest. That is also not a dependency, that is a dev dependency. So let's add that in the bottom here. Boom, and the other thing is we're going to add a new script called test. And we're just going to run Jest in that script. Now by default, Jest looks for files. I'm just going to close this terminal for 1 second. Whoop. Jest looks for files, and we'll go in the API, and we're going to test this authenticate route. So we have to create a directory in here called __tests __. And it'll look for any files in here that have the .test.js extension and run those as tests. So we'll add a test in here called authenticate. I didn't spell it right. Authenticate.test.js. Boom. And now we're writing our first test. So without importing anything, Jest and its features get automatically imported in here, and so we're going to have to see a lot of those features today because authenticate is a somewhat complicated route. So describe is that thing. We're going to start it by wrapping our entire thing, and it's going to be called a suite, a test suite. So we'll have just describe, and it's a function, and it's going to take some sort of descriptive statement like describe authenticate or authenticate route, whatever you want to call it, and that'll just be the overall test suite for this file. Of course, you can nest these things, which maybe we'll see if we can do that. So it's going to take a function as a callback, and in that callback we can have those it statements, and these it statements are going to be the actual tests that are going to run as part of that test suite. So let's say something like it, and it'll bring up the code for just a second here. Now this is obviously not TDD, just so you know. I'm going to go through and I'm going to test every piece of this code so that we see and make sure that everything in this thing is functioning as expected. But it is definitely not TDD, so there could be bugs in here. So the first thing here is that the method has to be post. If it's not post, we return some sort of status. So let's test that. Let's write a test. So it should return a 405 if the method is not post. Boom. So that's our first Jest test. Here we go. We haven't imported anything. We haven't done anything, but this is our first Jest test. And if we go in here and view the terminal, and say the yarn test is going to run Jest, and hopefully we've configured it properly. We have, so it found our test, and it ran it, and it passed. Woohoo! Look at that. We passed our test in our authenticate route suite, and it finds a file for us. This is why Jest is so amazing. Literally install some things, possibly configure a babel.config, and then you're good to go. Okay, so obviously there's nothing in here, so it's gonna pass. So by default, what we can do is we can just say, I fail, and we can give some sort of warning like not implemented. It should just fail this test, fail. Either it says, yeah, so it failed, not implemented, just so we don't get a pass, a false positive as they call it, that it passed even though it didn't test anything. All right, so let's go ahead and write our first test. First thing we can do is probably import that route. So import authenticate from, and we'll go up one, authenticate. There we go. So we got it in our old function, and it is a function, it's like a route. So it takes 2 parameters. It is a function itself. And so when we go here to test it, we're going to do something like const result equals, or we could say response. What's the response? This also can be async. They can return promises to handle async properties. So async, we're going to do await, authenticate. Here, and it's going to take 2 objects, request and response. Ooh, which we will have to mock. And one of the biggest pieces for me of learning how to test was how to do mocks properly. And I'm definitely not the guru on that, but so we really want to focus on how do we mock these things properly. So we're only testing this specific method and not having issues with request and response. So I'm going to go ahead and configure those for you, and I'll walk you through what they look like. Okay, so what we have here is I've set up these 2 global variables, or at least scoped them to this suite, which is the request and response object, and we're just mocking them out. So so far, we don't really need any default request, although maybe you do if you have certain headers you want to expect, but we're not going to have that. So default request is going to be empty. The default response, at least for the first test, all I need is this function status and the function end. And Jest provides these wonderful abilities to do mocking. Now mocking, you can use other libraries for that, like sign in and that sort of thing, but Jest mocking is amazing, and you can do lots of nice assertions on it without any extra libraries. So Jest we have here is the dot function, which is going to provide us with a mock function. In this case, I'm choosing to return an object, which is just the same response object from here, just so I can do some chaining. And then the other function here is just end, and I don't have any parameters or any work to do within here. So when I pass these in, request and response, my function is going to get these properties and send us back and be able to access these and call these. So one thing we're going to need to do is if we need to make sure that the method is post, we'll probably, or we method is not post, we'll probably do like request.method is equal to, and we'll pass it get, something like that. So we can force it to be a get request, and that way we can have it here be authenticate. All right, the other thing is that, of course, these don't want to be carried over to other tests. So there's a couple functions here, before each, or before, or the after each and the after, and these are functions that run before each test. Or you can just do a before, which is before the entire test suite to run. And that'll do is this, it'll just reset these variables every time. So if we do make modifications, because they're not immutable, then it'll get reset after every test, which is great. So here we go, this is kind of all we need to get going. This method should only run, we passed in a get, so it should only run up to, let's take a look at the code, only run up to here. It should return this res.status405 and then end. And next we have to do some assertions. So assertions are the really big part of the tests where you actually check to see what the result was and if it was what you expected. Now, we're not going to get anything back. If you take a look at here, like the end is empty. So we're not going to get any result or anything back from that. So instead what we're going to want to do is just check to see and make sure status got called with the correct status and end got called with the correct end. Or correct end. It just got called. I guess that's probably what we want. So we're going to use another built-in function from Jest called expect. Expect. Boom. And then we can say res.status, which is a function we passed in, this mock function, .to be called with, and then 405. So this is why Jest mock functions are so nice. You can snoop or spy, whatever you want to call it, on the parameters that are passed into this function when it's called. We can also count the number of times it's executed, which maybe we'll just do for end. And we can see that I want this res.status to be called with this 405 number, which should match our tests. If we don't pass in post, it gets 405. So let's do that. And then we can expect below res.end over here, .to have been called times 1. Just called once, just to make sure that we have that called. So let's run that. Yarn test. Ooh, it failed. Let's see what happened. Authenticate. I'm wondering if I didn't set up Babel properly. I just modified this .babelrc from the babel.config.js to use the next Babel config, which is great. And then we ran the test, and let's see what happens, which it actually does run this time. Hooray. Still fails, which is expected. But you can see here, there's an error that says Mongoose. Looks like you're trying to test Mongoose with Jest default. But we don't actually want to test Mongoose. We don't actually connect to the database right now, which is another chance for us to mock things. So we look inside of the authenticate route. There's a couple services here. Let's get rid of this. A couple services here: database service, auth service, and user. So user and database service both use Mongo, so we need to mock those out. Now Jest provides us a nice easy way to do that, right up at the top. We can just do Jest mock and pass in those routes, which I think it's up to, because in here it's up, oh, it's up 3. Here, services, database. We'll mock auth, and we'll mock models, user. There we go. So that should just allow us to run this test. And it passes. Wonderful. Ignoring those warnings. So it got a not 405. So it got 405 because get was passed in. We should probably do a test in here to make sure that it doesn't get 405 if post happens. But what we'll do is this, that in order to get past this, we need to pass in a post. So next thing we see here is database.connect is called. So we need to make sure that we connect to the database. So we'll do, there's two options here. There's the sign up, and then there's the, looks like login. So we can pick one of those two. Well, let's go and set up. I think what we'll do is we'll create a new test suite here, describe. So we're doing a nested test suite. Sign up. So we'll do a sign up test suite, and we'll do a login, because this route handles both login. So inside of sign up, we have to make sure that it is sign up, first of all. And we want to test to see if there is no, if you already have a user and you're trying to sign up, that we get some sort of error. So we'll go over here, we'll create a test, something like should return 400 if user already exists. Here we go. Boom. And we'll do the similar sort of setup, except we'll just go in here. You know what? We do need a default because we want the default method of this request to be post. That way we can override it here for our failure, but most of the time we just want it to pass. So we'll go get response out of here, because we're actually going to use response. Await, oops, I forgot async. Async. Await, authenticate, request and response. Now, as you can see here, when we're checking for this user, we're going to need something. We're going to need an email, and that's part of the body. So let's just go ahead and copy this body over here. In the request, we have some sort of body, and it's going to have, oops, it's going to have these objects in it. Name, email, password, and is sign up. So name, we can just have ABC. Email, abc at abc.com. Very classic email. Password, ABC, it's a super secure account. And then is sign up we'll leave out, and we'll modify it, oops, we'll modify it down here, because we're doing is sign up here. So before each test of is sign up, before each, what we'll do is we'll set rec.body.is sign up to be true. So every single test inside of this test suite for signing up will have is sign up be true. Perfect. So is it already, so we're getting this good object now in request that has all these items for the body, which should allow us to go find something on the email. And then we're still trying to get to this response here. So we can just write our assertions because we know what they want to be. So we can expect res.status to have been called with 405. We can also expect that res.end to be called with, now this one gets called, oops, to have been called with. What did I put of this? To be called with. Interesting. You can do have been called with and have and to be called with. That's right, have been called. Okay, so have been called with. Now res.end at this point actually gets past some string and it's dynamic. So of course we could try and match it and make sure that it's the exact string we expect. But in this case, I actually don't really care. All I want is some sort of error message back. And so what we can do is we can actually use Jest again to say expect.any string. And this is sort of a handy function that says I don't really care what comes back except that it has to be a string. And this .any or this expect function has a lot of nice handlers to mock out the expected return values without being specific, especially when it comes to arrays or objects. And we might take a look into that just a bit later. Good, okay, so we got this string coming back on end. We got the status 405 coming back. Oh, sorry, it should be 400. What am I doing? Expected 400, silly. on that authenticate response. So let's run that. Boop, 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 error. So one passed, that one above us, that's fine. So one passed, So it says there's an error on 2 have been called with 400, and it says because we got no calls and it expected 400, never got called. The reason that is, and it's being hidden so well, is that here, find user, user.find1, never gets called because user.find1 is a mock function that doesn't do anything. So user never comes back. It probably does some other stuff like new user and all that kind of nonsense, user.safe. So what we want to do is we'll probably just check that database.connect gets called. We also want to make sure that find1 gives us the correct things back. So let's go over here. These are an external modules, so we can actually provide our own mock to them by giving us a function, and that function returning an object. And in this case, we're saying find1 is going to be the function we're going to mock, which can be a jest.function. Now it's getting a bit more complicated than that, but we can use that example here for database. We want to make sure that connect gets called, so we have a function called connect, which is just a jest.function here. And everyone's happy. So in terms of find1, we want 2 options, one that it returns an actual user and one that returns no user. And so we can simply say whatever the email passed in is, we can match it. This is kind of a hacky way. I'm not sure if this is actually ideal for how to do mocking, or if you can replace this at runtime. Not sure what it looks like. But for me, I'm just going to say if the email is equal to abc@abc.com, that's going to be a valid one, and we're going to return a promise.resolve with some object with that email inside. Otherwise, we can turn promise.resolve of null. There we go, because this function find1 should definitely return a promise, so it's going to return, this is just a fake promise of email, and if there is no proper email, then we're going to return null. We could find the user. Which means that, oh look, this is our default good email, so we want to probably set that up and override it here by just saying email is going to be fake at abc.com. There we go, so it doesn't match over here, which should give us resolve null. And that way, we can get into our 400 status call. We also want to make sure, I guess we can do that over here, expect that, we'll have to import it. We don't have an imported database yet, so let's just do that here. Import database service from up 3 services. Oh my goodness, database. Spelling is rough for me today. And down here, expect this dot connect. Boom dot, whoa, to have been called times 1. So we only expect it to be called once. Go, run the test. Let's see what happens. Okay, failure, that's maybe to be expected. Ew, interesting. It's not a constructor. Context is not a constructor. Yes, okay. Maybe I know what's happening here. I think so if it's sign up, which is true, and you have a user. My mistake. We're doing sign up and we have a user. So we don't want to modify this over here for every test. We just want to modify it for this test specific. Oh, no, we don't. We'll modify it for a later test when we actually want to do signing up with the user that doesn't exist. My mistake. Holy moly. There we go. Okay, running. Goodness me, get your mocks right. Here we go. Now we're going to run it. Now it's going to be fine. Perfect. So we get that object back. We get that 400, and we get some sort of string, and connect gets called, which is lovely. Of course, we could assert that this gets called with the proper email, but I think that's probably okay considering that, we should be explicit. Let's be explicit. So expect user, user dot find 1 dot to have been called with, and let's just, for example, we don't really care what the email is going to be at this point, so we can just do expect dot object containing, and here we have an object, and then we'll have email, and this can be expect dot any string. There, and you can see that I think I'm missing a, no? Why is it? Oh, it's actually valid prettier. No, it's not. Expect object containing open parentheses email. Where did I go wrong? Oh, export. Expect. Here we go. You can just start to see the power of these expect statements, we expect an object with email when it calls user.findOne. Let's make sure we import user real quick from models user / user. Oops, that's going to be capital U. There we go. And run. Ta-da! Perfect. So we still pass, which means that user did get called with that structure we expected of an object with an email inside of it. Wonderful. So I hope this gives you a good idea of what it looks like to test Jest. I'm not going to go through and test every single one. You can also see that we have that because we have authenticated route as a suite and sign up as a subsuite inside of that authenticated route. It groups the tests like nicely. I'm going to go ahead and finish this and then give you an example at the end of what the entire thing looks like. Okay, so here's the kind of the finished file is going to look like. We have a bunch of tests here. First one in our authenticated route describe block or our test suite. We have one that makes sure that we are always passing in a post and it returns 405 if we don't. Then we have 2 scenarios or 2 sub-test suites, nested test suites. The sign-up test suite and the authenticated and the login test suite. So sign-up has a function to say if the user already exists but we're trying to sign up, return some error. If we are signing up someone and they are a new user, then we should create the user and then return a token. So we can just take a peek at that one. Here's our sign up, returning it. So we pass in some sort of new email, so it doesn't match. We expect the database to be called. Find one's going to be called anyways, but it should return nothing. The user constructor should be called. We should call this auth service create user with some expected string. Then we have save on the user to be called. Our auth service should sign a token with some sort of expected payload, and then end should be called. Similarly with login, we have 3 tests here. If we have a user and the passwords match, we should return a token. If we have a user but the passwords don't match, we need to return a 401. And then if we have no user, then we should return some 400, like you should be signing up. Anyway, so that's a really brief take a look. I mean, not so brief. There's a long look at how we implement tests on a backend API route in NextJS. Let me quickly show you what it's going to look like to use RTL, or React Testing Library, on the front end and testing like a React form with that. Okay, so I just set up this test for our login page using RTL, React Testing Library, and by the package @testing-library React, written by Kenzie Dawes, probably the best testing library I've ever used for React. So I'm just going to run through this quickly. There's lots of features inside of React Testing Library that's going to make testing React amazing. And I should rather show you using Cypress as well, because that's even better to visualize, but that'll be a different video. So briefly, we're just going to go through and we're going to test 2 scenarios in the login page, one to make sure we can sign up, and one to make sure we can log in. So I just kind of scaffolded this out. We have a couple things we're going to import from React Testing Library: render, fire event, and screen. So render, obviously being able to render our elements, as you can see how I've kind of used it already right here. We're going to render that login page, which I've imported from our pages. Fire event, simply just to fire events, like a button click or an input type, that sort of thing. And screen is going to give us the, you can see I printed out here, screen.debug, but screen is going to give us the actual DOM elements on the screen that we render at the time. I've also gone ahead and mocked out isomorphic fetch because we're going to be using that call to do some validation. And I've imported, obviously, the login page. One thing I want to briefly mention is that I kind of changed up the folder structure here in the middle of that, and I put our _test directory outside of the pages directory, just because NextJS, and maybe they fixed it, I'm not quite sure, but last time I've tried this, NextJS actually renders out things that are inside of the pages _test directory. And so we don't want anything inside of pages to be running anything inside of tests. So over here we have our API routes and our pages tests. All right, let's jump right in. So let's just take a look at this. One kind of thing is if I run yarn test now, yarn test, it's actually going to run every single test suite you can find. So you can see it's going to run the authenticate test suite. Let's go up over here, blah, 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 blah. It ran the authenticate test suite and it passed, which is great. And it's also running our login test suite. Now I don't want that to happen every time, number one, because it takes a lot of time to run those, but also I just want to run this one. I just want to run login and check, and it'll actually be even more annoying. I only have 2 test suites. If I have like 50, and I want to run every single one if I'm just trying to work on this login test. So we're going to run just a login test in a minute. But as you can see, the debug gives us the DOM for what that looks like, for what our login page looks like. And you can see here's our labels and our inputs. And there should be some buttons down here. There's the login button. And then the needed account, which is going to give us a sign up button. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 2 tests. The first one is, should allow me to log in? And so what we'll do here is just, we know we're by default already on the login screen, so we're just going to type in some email and some password and click on the login button and then expect that our fetch gets called with that payload. So we can comment out the screen.debug, and instead we'll do fire event. We can do some typing first. Dot, and I think it's change. Boom, and we want to pick up that element, so screen. Okay, so what we should be doing is get by label text, and it should be, let me just take a peek here because the label text is kind of silly. So password, we'll get that one. Naturally, it'll have to include the emoji. And we're going to give it some value. Now, I believe you have to do this target value as if we're mocking the event, and we're just going to say password. That'll be our password. And similar situation for the username or the email. Boom, boom. Let's copy and paste that. We'll do that first, actually. Whoa. That's not what we want. Value, email at email.com. There we are. So we'll fire those two change events on both of these elements. Then we'll have to do one more thing. We'll fire event dot click. I want to make sure we click that login button. Screen dot get by text. We'll pass it, I think it's log in, like that. I'm going to click that element. Let me just scroll down and see. Just want to make sure. Yes, okay, log in, all lowercase like that. So I'm going to click that button, and then we'll do our expect here, expect fetch dot to have been called with, and then there's two parameters here, so we expect dot any string, except we'll go and find the actual string, so we want to make sure we're hitting the correct route there. And then this one is expect dot object containing, because this is going to include our method, which we expect to definitely be a post request. Whoops. We also expect the body to be here, and this is going to be a string. Expect dot, and we'll actually, we'll want to make sure it matches exactly. Dot JSON dot stringify this object here, and it's going to have email rather, and password. It'll also have is sign up, which should be false. So email and password aren't defined, so let's just go ahead and define them up here. So const email is equal to that string of email at email.com. And then we'll give this a value here of email. And then similar situation for password. Boom, password, and we're going to give it a string of password. Okay, wonderful. So let's just run this one. If I just want to run this test suite, I can do F on this one, but I think I want to do just this if statement. So I'm going to put F in front of it, and I'm going to run all of these tests again. Oh darn, it ran. So you can see it skipped one, but it actually still ran. Beep, 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 beep. I got to get rid of those prints. My goodness, it still ran the authenticate. So what we want to do is yarn test login. There we go. So now I should be able to figure out every single one of those items. Boop-a-doo. Now I expect fetch to have been called with this, and it got called with, it never got called. Fetch never got called. Why did fetch never get called? Okay, so I figured it out. I haven't done tests before with Formic, but we have to do a wait for on the expect. So because you can tell in here, take a look. I am doing here. This is a state transition. And so if we don't wait for the state transition to happen, then it all gets bungled. And so inside of that expect, that's the top of the file. Inside of that expect, which actually calls the fetch, there needs to be a wait for so the state transition can happen while the render's in play. Good, okay, so I'm not gonna bother, I think, testing the other one right now. Just keep this video short. But I'll test it, and you can, I'll write the test, and you can I'll put it up on the GitHub page, so you can go and look at it if you'd like to. But briefly, we'll just go through it. Again, here we have React testing library. We don't need this stuff anymore. We have render for rendering the components, firing the event for actually making changes to the DOM, screen, I shouldn't say the DOM, but firing events to the browser. The screen, which is going to be the screen we're looking at. Wait for, which is waiting for asynchronous or state updates to happen in React components. We have our fetch, which is mocked out at the top here, as well as our login page that we're testing. So we go through in our test, we're just going to make sure we can be able to log in. We have a render. We have some of that login page. We have the email and password in there. We're firing a couple events to enter our email, enter our password by typing. Then we click the login button, and then we expect that our fetch gets called with this route and a bunch of methods here. So let's give that a go. I think there's actually going to be... Oh, I tested the whole thing. That's all right. So there's an error, and you can see that that's expected here that I put in, what's received is going to be, it's different, and it's just that I'm missing this name property. So if I go ahead and put in that name property, which I forgot is always sent, even if we're not signing up, and I run test again, we'll run all of them, pass, and pass. There's a bit of warning, so you can ignore. There we go. Everything passing. We could test coverage as well, I think, by doing minus coverage. And just take a quick peek about where we're at with our coverage. It's per file and per component, so you can see here all the components we touch. There's a couple branches we haven't hit. Most of the functions and lines are covered. 88% is pretty good. Obviously, the login page has some significant pieces that are missing, just because we haven't tested them. But you can take it all out, authenticate, and our authenticate route got a pretty good coverage of about 100%. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content related to building your own things and building products. Thank you. See you later.